basketball gods are angry. It's been a chaotic few days in the NBA, and we're going to go through a bunch of topics here, including Giannis being out past the All-Star break, the Mark Williams trade being rescinded, AD's dominant start for the Mavs, and subsequent injury, as well as some trade stuff. Hi, I'm Zach, and welcome to Not Another NBA Podcast, the NBA podcast that doesn't take itself or the league too seriously. And we've got some breaking-ish news before we jump into the stuff I was planning on talking about today. It was announced while I was putting this stuff together that Giannis was out with a calf strain and will be out until what Shams is reporting as shortly after the All-Star break. So I guess Kuzma's going to have an even easier transition than we initially thought. Doesn't have to go straight to playing third fiddle. He just has to play off of Dame Lillard. And how different is that really compared to playing off of Jordan Poole? Yes, that's a joke. But what's not a joke is what it does to the Bucks if he misses a significant chunk of time, because shortly after the All-Star break is not particularly descriptive. It's not all that precise, and it's probably not all that much of a shock either. But they're currently fifth in the East, but only 2 games ahead of seventh. They are 3 ahead of eighth and only 3.5 ahead of ninth. So it's not a given to say that they've got a playoff spot kind of wrapped up and they're going to be able to avoid the play in as they wait for him to get back and then figure out how they're going to get Kuzma to fit in with their group. I think it was Zach Lowe mentioned that, last time we saw Kyle Kuzma in a third fiddle role, he was actually really good. He tried on defense. He hit the boards. He hit some spot up jumpers. And if that's the Kyle Kuzma that we see with the Milwaukee Bucks to go along with Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo, then, that actually might fit a little bit. However, we haven't seen that version of Kyle Kuzma since 2020 or so, right? It's been 5 years. He's been in Washington, in DC for a while, playing really unhealthy basketball, if we can be honest about it. He had a chance to go to Dallas last year, and he didn't want to. And now he's in Milwaukee. We'll see. The other thing that it has some implication on is since Giannis is out past the All-Star break, he's not going to be participating in All-Star weekend, which does open up a roster spot for somebody to get that injury replacement slot. And so it does make me wonder if they're going to go with a big to replace him in the East. Do we maybe see, my initial thought would have been Jalen Johnson for that spot, but he's out for the year. Is it possible that we get to see Jarrett Allen from the Cavs completing their core 4 takeover of the Bay? I think he had a legitimate case. I wasn't shocked when he wasn't named an All-Star out of the gate personally. And this is coming from somebody that hosts a Cavaliers podcast as my main podcast. So the Sports Ethos Cleveland Cavaliers podcast, if you want to go give that a follow and a listen. But does he have a shot now? It's possible. Also, they don't have to be held to positions on the injury replacements. I think they normally do. It's common that you would see if a big gets taken out of the All-Star game for a health reason. Usually they replace him with another big, but they don't have to. It's not a requirement like the All-Star voting and the reserves have a required number of each of the backcourt and frontcourt positions. Could that mean that it opens the door for somebody like a Trae Young or a LaMelo Ball who are on the outside looking in from the guard spots based on how deep the guard position has been for the East and how difficult I would imagine the coaches had it, trying to pick which reserves were going to make the team. I could see them going that route. I also saw the case made by somebody on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling that, that the conferences shouldn't matter with this weird mini tournament thing that you're doing. And if so, would you have Demonis Sabonis be the injury replacement for Giannis? I don't see that one happening. I understand where it's coming from. I can actually like I get with the weird format that we have now, conferences really don't matter. But when you're talking about the honor, when you're talking about the selection to being an all-star for your conference, I feel like conferences do still matter. If you're going to make them matter for the voting process and for the reserves with the coaches picking those, then I think they have to still matter with the injury replacements as well. If somebody in the East goes down, somebody in the East replaces them. If somebody in the West goes down, somebody in the West replaces them. I don't think that you can just blur the line at injury replacement and then end up having 13 West All-Stars and only 11 this year for the East that actually participate in the tournament. That's just my 2 cents. I just don't think that they're going to do that. They haven't done they haven't done reseeding for the playoffs. They haven't abolished the conferences or the divisions for any other reason. At this point, I don't see them doing it all of a sudden now for an injury replacement for the playoffs. But either way, it's not good news for the Milwaukee Bucks. It's not good news for Giannis Antetokounmpo, and hopefully, it's not a serious. It was initially said to be a mild calf strain, which I'm not a doctor. I don't know what mild to severe to what would the other thing be? Would it be a soft, a light, a barely an injury, just a little bruise? I don't know. Bruises can be bad too. I don't know. I just hope that he's not. I hope it's not one of those things that lingers and causes too many problems for the Bucks. Again, guy that is obviously a Cavs fan, hosts a Cavs podcast. I don't want to see the Bucks all of a sudden like jump into contender status or anything, but also I don't like to see the best players in the sport not playing the sport. And so with that not being great news for the Bucks, let's go to some not too great news for the Lakers. Mark Williams, who was recently traded for Dalton Connect, as well as that coveted first round pick. That trade is getting reversed. It's getting rescinded. Um, should we be particularly shocked? I'm truly not sure. But something came out in the physical that they didn't like, and they said, nope, we're not doing this. Undo, mulligan, reverse, whatever you want to say. But again, should we be particularly shocked? I'm not sure. This guy's played like 40% of the games that he could have played in his young career. Everyone is saying how this sucks for the Lakers that this happened, which is true. But it might also be a blessing in disguise. They gave up Dalton Connect, as I mentioned, who's having a good rookie season. More importantly, they emptied their future asset chest for this with that 2031, I believe it was, pick. He going all in, essentially. Basically, what everything they probably should have had to use to get Luka and didn't have to use, they used to go get Mark Williams as a lob threat for Luka. And he obviously has a well-documented injury history. If they didn't catch whatever red flag this physical uncovered, they could have been in a really, really rough spot with a guy who can't get on the court and no assets left to try to go get another one. Now, why it does suck for them is the timing of it, because this happened after the trade deadline. They couldn't kill the deal and then like go and renegotiate the same deal or pivot to another one with those same assets. And this is why taking it right up to the deadline before you make your move is such a risk, and why a lot of teams don't like to do that, especially on a guy you have to know the physical is going to be a concern for. I even saw a quote somewhere that Rob Pelinka had said something about how they weren't concerned about his health or his physical at all. And then the very next day, they're rescinding a trade because of the medicals. So it's obvious that they found something that they weren't expecting and were not comfortable with long term. Um, and it does, to a certain extent, feel a little bit like a fumble on the Lakers' part in the way that leads me to ask a question that I don't think I'm alone in asking. Is Rob Palinka good at this, or has he been really lucky at this? Rob is at a charmed professional life. He was Kobe's guy, which was not only lucrative, but also set his reputation for life by affiliation. And that's why he got the GM job of the Lakers, Kobe's organization. LeBron James decides he just wants to live in LA now and signs there, even though the team was bad for almost a decade, but it had some young pieces in place. Rob made the AD trade, but if you remember, that whole thing got really ugly. And even with AD doing his best to completely blow up the Pelicans and force his way to the Lakers, it still took almost all their young, promising talent. They kept Kuzma and gave everything else up. Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, DeAndre Hunter's draft rights, multiple first rounders. It was a haul, arguably an overpay, but they won a title, so it was worth it. But then they blew up a title team for the Russell Westbrook debacle. Every offseason, they have needed a 3 and D wing on this team, and instead, they use their mid-level exceptions on one-way ball handlers. Think Kendrick Nunn, think Gabe Vincent. They let Alex Caruso walk over a little bit of money. They let Dennis Schroeder go multiple times. The list kind of goes on and on and on of how they've not done a great job building this thing around LeBron and AD outside of the bubble championship year, the team that, again, they blew up. And now, and by the way, before I even move on, I understand some people are going to say, well, that was all LeBron's fault. I don't know, man. There's a GM of the team. The GM has to negotiate these deals and these trades and these contracts. It's his name getting signed on the dotted line. He's the one that's got to go get approval from ownership. You obviously take into consideration what your star players are saying that they would like or be behind. But I mean, at the end of the day, if all of the decisions that are being made are LeBron's, then why do you even have a GM? So now Nico Harrison has an ego stroke and drops Luka Doncic in Rob's lap with like 5 days before the deadline, knowing that you need a big to replace AD because AD was the thing that Nico Harrison wanted. And you take it down to the wire for a guy you've now rescinded the deal on, and you have basically no path forward to a good option for your starting center spot. They can only sign a buyout guy that was making less than mid-level money, and they have to waive someone to do it because their roster's full. And they're only like, I think it's like 1.6 million away from the second apron. So flexibility is not on their side in any way. Um, Jackson Hayes, you're going to be that lob threat, man. Maybe I don't know. Did you see the game? The time I'm recording this last night. Maybe they can just play all guards and score like 200 points. I think it was last night. Didn't you just see whatever it was last night, the night before? Time has no meaning anymore. Austin Reeves dropping like 45. Let's just watch LeBron, Luka, and Reeves outscore everyone and then give up a layup line dunk drill on the other end. That can be Laker basketball for the rest of the season. It's going to be highly, highly entertaining. I think that's a decent segue enough to the guy that they traded away, Anthony Davis. He played absolutely possessed in his first game for the Dallas Mavericks. Till basketball gods decided it's the night. 16 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 block shots in 30 minutes in that game. An absolute monstrous first half where he did most of that damage. He was apparently the third Mav to have 20, 10, and 5.5 since it was tracked. I also believe I saw that those 3 blocks were kind of like a catalyst towards the team. I can't remember what they ended up with. Was it 18 blocks or something as a team? It was like a franchise record. And we shouldn't be shocked. I said this in a short right afterwards. We should not be shocked by how well Anthony Davis played. It was never about him being bad at basketball. It was always about giving up on a generational face of your franchise at 25 years old. Regardless of how hard the Mavs try to slander Luka on his way out and convince us that he's not one of those high work ethic guys like Shaq, it doesn't and isn't going to make sense for the long-term Dallas Mavericks to trade away Luka Doncic. It's just not, regardless of who they would have gotten back. So this was, for me at least, it was never about it being AD. Do I think that they should have canvassed the league if they were truly going to be out of the Luka Doncic business and see what the best offer they could have gotten was? Yeah. Yeah, I think they should have. Do I recognize that that could have opened the door for Luka to try to influence his landing spot? Yes. Yes, I do. But I still think you got to do it. It's Luka Doncic, and you're still going to get the best offers from teams because it's Luka Doncic. And so this wasn't about AD the player, particularly not AD the player this year. He's still really, really dominant when he is locked in like he was. And that's what you're going to get on those nights that he's locked in and healthy and really, playing like he's got something to prove. He heard all of it. He knows that Mavs fans are protesting outside the building. He's heard that the organization is having to issue refunds to people that are wanting to get rid of their season tickets. He knows all of these things, and he took that personally, obviously. It was like, no, I'm going to give these fans something to get behind, and I'm going to be that guy now. And he came out possessed like he was going to be that guy. And him getting hurt in this game as he was doing that in his first game as a Dallas Maverick is just cruel and unusual punishment for Mavs fans. It looked like, honestly, he just took a shot to the nuts. And not that doesn't suck. It sucks horribly. But usually you can walk that one off. But then he went to the locker room and we never saw him again. As of recording this, they're just calling it a lower body injury. And I don't know details. But that's basically the Mavericks fan base just lost their franchise guy. They're the guy who took the torch from Dirk Nowitzki, who passed it to Luka Doncic, and he was supposed to be their guy for 15 years, 20 years, however long Luka could play. That's what Mavs fans were envisioning, having a perennial MVP candidate, a guy who won Rookie of the Year and then proceeded to have 5 straight first-team All-NBA appearances 6 years into the league. At 25 years old, your organization just got rid of him. And the guy that they targeted and brought back in his place came out just itching to prove something, played like his hair was on fire, really gave you something that if you were like, oh, I am still upset that I don't have Luka, but I get to root for this. If this is the kind of AD that I'm going to get, that is amazing. And then he gets hurt. It's a tough week to be a Mavs fan. Now, with that being said, I want to touch on a few of the trade things that happened last week as well, just kind of league-wide, just hit a few, couple of quick thoughts, nothing insanely long. We're not going to ramble too much here. But I do want to hit on a couple of things. The Cavs, as I mentioned, they made a big trade, DeAndre Hunter They only had to give up Karis LeVert and George Niang and some pick equity that was not any of their most shiny long term assets. That was a big deal. Big home run swing. Really great deal for the Cavs, in my opinion. I'm not going to sit here and give you all of my thoughts on that. Now, I did a 30-minute breakdown of that trade on Thursday. If you want to go listen to the Sports Ethos Cleveland Cavaliers podcast, you can do so. But that one was big. It's clear the Cavs thought that they had a need to continue to compete and be on that championship level contention in not just in the East, but to have a shot to win it all. And they felt like they needed a big wing to help counter the Bostons of the world, the OKCs of the world, and they went and they got one. And in my opinion, they got the best one they could have gotten. No shade at Cam Johnson, but I was a DeAndre Hunter guy myself. I didn't think that it was even going to be an option. And not only was it an option, they got it done without having to give up some of their best long term assets and also do some really good cap maneuvering to get themselves under the luxury tax line. Just fantastic trade for the Cleveland Cavaliers. The next one I wanted to, I'm actually going to pose this question to you. If you're watching this on YouTube, please let me know in the comments if you know the answer to this question. What are the Raptors doing? This Brandon Ingram trade has me utterly confused. He's been on the block for like 2 years. He needs paid this summer. That's why nobody wants him on their team. Everything that we have heard for those 2 years is that he expects to be a max guy, and no one wants to pay him that. Maybe the Raptors do because they take him on. And this is why it's confusing to me. It's not because Brandon Ingram sucks at basketball. He certainly does not. It's because I seem to recall not 1 year ago this time, they got rid of OG Anunoby. They got rid of Pascal Siakam. And a big reason that they did that was so that they didn't have to pay them because they were too similar to Scotty Barnes. And they wanted to build this thing around Scotty Barnes. So now you go get Brandon Ingram, who is basically the same archetype as Scotty Barnes, but without the defense and like half the playmaking. If we're going to do this, why didn't you just keep Pascal Siakam and pay him? He's a much better basketball player and actually does stuff that translates to winning basketball. And why do it now? You're 13th in the East, looking at a nice shot at a good draft pick in a draft that people have been raving about forever. And to my knowledge, they've got their pick. And you bring in a guy to presumably help you win more games this year before you have to pay him this summer. I've heard this idea that they're doing this as kind of like a pre-agency, like they did with RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly in that OG deal. They traded for them before they became free agents and, paid them, right? But or at least now that I think about it, did they have to pay both of them? I don't remember. I'd have to look it up, and it's not that important right now. Really, this is about Brandon Ingram and whether you want to bring him in, put him next to Scotty Barnes, put him next to RJ Barrett, figure out how that's supposed to fit on a basketball court. Hope that it doesn't get you to win too many more games, but if it doesn't, then do you pay him? And if it does, then I guess you got to pay him. I don't know. I think I would be a hard pass on this one from me. We also had Jimmy Butler go to the Warriors. I feel like you can't do NBA content in any way if you're not going to talk at all about Jimmy Butler to the Warriors. I'll just start with this. I'm glad it's over. That saga of just soap opera, and I was over it months ago. I also have him on my fantasy team, and I've been frustrated all year long. Between the sandbagging it and the suspensions and the tweaks along the way, like he's been a useless fantasy player. It's been really, really frustrating. And I do get this. I get it for the Warriors. They had to do something. And he is something. You could even say if you're an optimist of Jimmy Butler, he's more than something. I would just be out of the Jimmy Butler business. He has now set multiple locker rooms on fire. He is 35 years old. He's not available nearly enough for the trade-off that comes with that relationship. He does fit the timeline of the guys that they have aging out. He looked good in his debut. They're saying all the right things about his fit, about his playmaking next to Curry, about the fact that he can also get his own shot and all of that. I understand. I do. I get why they did it. I just wouldn't. But that's easy for me to say. I'm not a GM for the Warriors. I'm just a guy with a podcast. I'm a fantasy GM, and did I mention he's been really screwing me on that? A couple of more quick hitters here. Marcus Smart, that deal, painful. You had to give up. You had to give up assets to go get him. You bring him in. He doesn't hardly play for you, and then you have to also attach assets to get rid of him. Just not the way that you wanted that to go. Um, Talking to a friend of mine who is a Celtics fan, mentioned, the writing was on the wall. It was obvious. They should have known that Marcus Smart was on the decline health wise. The way that he plays, it shouldn't have shocked anybody. Uh, might have a point. It still sucks. I understood what they were trying to do when they did it, but it's a tough way for that to end Marcus Smart's time in Memphis. Ben Simmons, this is not a trade, but a buyout decision. He is not planning to go to the Cavs. He's going to the Los Angeles Clippers. And again, as somebody that covers the Cavs on the internet, the idea of him coming into the Cavs locker room that has been so high on vibes was always a little off to me. And I think that they're probably just fine with him going to the Clippers. I know I am as a fan of that team. There's more opportunities for him in with the Clippers. They've probably got not probably, they definitely have a bigger role for him available. There's also much better weather than in Cleveland, Ohio. So good luck to Ben Simmons. Bullet dodged for the Cavs, and hopefully the just solid foundation of locker room personalities of James Harden and Kawhi Leonard, that should probably go really, really well if Ben Simmons does anything that resembles the Ben Simmons experience that we have witnessed from the outside looking into this point. The last one I want to touch on is a very, very, very small move, but I think could be an impactful one. The rich get richer, if you will. Torrey Craig signing with the Celtics. That is sneaky good. Torrey Craig is somebody that I had pegged for the Cavs as what I would hope would have been a buyout candidate. I don't know that I wouldn't have given up a second round pick to bring him in and just be sure before they made the DeAndre Hunter deal, because they needed more help on the wing, particularly help with size on the wing, somebody that could float between that 3 and 4 position. DeAndre Hunter is a much better player at doing that. I am very, very happy that they got him, but if they didn't make that kind of swing, Torrey Craig was somebody that was on my radar as like somebody that could give you spot minutes doing that, be like Dean Wade insurance and that kind of thing. And the Celtics got him, and I think that could be a sneaky big deal for the Celtics, who I understand, like, they've got probably the best talent starting 5 in the league. They might have the best, like, 7 deep in the league. They don't have as much depth down the depth chart in the rotation, in my opinion. And Torrey Craig could be somebody that they've got to lean on in some spots, and I think he can come through for him. So that is a shrewd move for the Celtics, I believe. So that's all I got for you. If you made it to the end, leave a like on the YouTube video. Tell me in the comments what your favorite move from the trade deadline was. If you're listening on an audio platform, go ahead and leave a 5-star review in whatever app that you're using right now. Till next time, thanks for nerding out with me.